Hi, and welcome to Mid-South Viewpoint. I'm Byron Tyler. If you're a resident of our city, or if you live in one of the suburbs surrounding our city, you have to be concerned about the crime and the violence that we see on the 6 o'clock news, the 10 o'clock news, and even things that happen that don't even get reported in our city. You have to be concerned. I hope that you'll just kind of lean in a little bit on the radio right now. And on our YouTube channels, we're making this available on video to hear about the passion and the heartbeat of something taking place this Sunday with Dr. Stacy Spencer of New Direction Church. Stacy, it's so good to see you.
Byron, it's good to be here, brother. Thank you for having me on.
Honestly, I was surprised you were able to make it on today because, Sunday is a busy day for pastors.
Oh, yeah.
This is something I know you're real passionate about, and that's why we wanted to get together because this Sunday, the 30th, is Whiteout Sunday. Tell me about it.
This summer, we saw an escalation of violence. I was on sabbatical in July and heard that a young man had been shot down by the police on my church property. And
wait a minute. On New Direction Church property?
Right, 5777 Winchester, which is our youth campus. And so that's where the altercation took place. And my sabbatical was ending, and I had to end it early to come back and deal with this dilemma. And so right after that, another young man was shot at LA Fitness over a basketball game right down the street from that same incident on Winchester. And so these two shootings really opened my mind and made me come to the realization that we have to do something about the violence in our community. And so we came together as pastors here recently to meet actually on the day of the funeral of Officer Sean Bolton, who was shot down at a traffic stop. And his death and the death of those young men really pricked our hearts to say we have to do something. So we came together collectively, black pastors, white pastors, Latino pastors, female pastors, Presbyterian, Baptist, Methodist, New Disciples of Christ. It didn't matter. We just wanted to come together. And we began to brainstorm on what we could do. And one of the ideas we initially had was to come together on next Sunday, the 30th, to wear all white. Why all white? Well, you look in the book of Revelations in chapter 7 when it talks about the number that no man can number, the 144,000 that were in robes. And John asked the angel, who are these? And he says, these are those who have come through great trials and tribulations. Their robes have been washed in the blood of the Lamb. They came from every race, tribe, and they were together standing in front of the Lamb. And so for us, Whiteout Sunday is all about whiting out violence. White is a symbol of surrender. It's a symbol of the dove. It's a symbol of peace and purity. And so we want all nations and all people to come together and march that day. So we'll march from City Hall to the Civil Rights Museum, where we'll have a small program to speak out on violence in our community.
As you mentioned, we were seeing it escalate. Just weekend before last, I believe there was like 5 homicides in one weekend. I haven't seen the report for this past weekend, but I'm sure it's staggering, and it is. And citizens are concerned. They're afraid to go outside their home. They're afraid to even go to a movie theater or go to the Kroger to go get groceries. Yeah. And so you're saying that we as the faith community have got to come together.
We have to. As a concerned father, I have a 20-year-old junior at UT Chat, and he came home this summer to work and to go to school to take a summer class. He got a job at the Hickory Hill Community Center as a camp counselor. But Byron, there was not a day that didn't go by that I wasn't praying for him that he wouldn't, number one, get pulled over by the police over a mistaken identity. Number two, that some of our own people would not kill him as he was trying to help the kids in that community. And I was so relieved when he went back to school, but it saddens me that I have to pray that kind of prayer, that I have to be concerned that his life could be taken. And he turned 20 this month, and the young man that was shot on my church property was 19. The young man that was shot at LA Fitness was 19, on his way to college. And both those young men were snuffed out, and Officer Sean Bolton snuffed out. And it just aches in my heart that we have all these churches in Memphis, right? We have over 3,000 churches. And something's wrong with that picture that we would have this kind of violence in that many churches. So if we can come together as the body of Christ and stand up and cry loud and spare not and come together, I just believe that we have authority to take back our communities through prayer, through action, by standing together. The Bible says where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I will be with them. And whatsoever you bind on earth should be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth should be loosed in heaven. And the gates of hell, he tells Peter, will not prevail against the church. So the gates of hell are a defensive weapon, not an offensive weapon, which means that the devil is on his heels. And we just got to keep pushing to get all this evil, all this violence out of our communities.
Statistically speaking, I mean, Memphis ranks as one of the top crime cities. I mean, and sometimes I think the rankings are even higher than cities like New York and Chicago, which is staggering,
Yeah.
when you think about it. I'm thankful in light of what we've seen recently with the Officer Bolton's, being shot, that we haven't seen any rioting and things like we have in St. Louis, I know there's circumstances were quite different, I know, but, it doesn't take a lot to create a sense of anger and a sense of, my rights have been stepped on, And sometimes I think we as a community, no matter what skin color we are, we need to lay those down and come together and try to, first of all, understand each other, listen to each other, and like you said, work together as a unit,
Right.
and try to understand. You talk about mistaken identity. It actually happened to me one time, believe it or not. Newly married and police officers driving around. I was actually digging a hole in my backyard, and they drove by and saw me and mistaked me for somebody who robbed a local store.
Wow.
Put me in the back of the car. My wife, she was new with our first child. She was pregnant. She got on her knees and started praying. And thankfully, when they took me in front of the store clerk, I wasn't the one, which I knew I wasn't the one. But you know what? It gave me a little bit of a taste what it's like. I've talked to those in the black community, and they said, look, Byron, for some of the most senseless things, just walking down the sidewalk, I get pulled over and asked just because of my skin color.
Yeah, you say we're not a Ferguson, we're not a Baltimore yet, and I pray we don't get to that point. But we are sitting on a powder keg in the sense that there are people in the community that are tired of the violence, particularly the Latino community. I was talking to Pastor Greg Diaz the other day who sent me a picture of a slain young Latino man who was shot in the head. The picture was being spread over Facebook, over social media, because this young man had been robbed of his paycheck by 3 African-American young men, and they were sick of it. The community chased one of the young men down while he was still shooting at them, and they had a rally the other day where they drove around, about 1,000 Latinos drove around 240 because they're tired of the violence. And many of them, their cries go unanswered or unheard because they're afraid that if they say something to the police, then they'll be further, they'll open up another can of worms because some of them are not documented properly. So even with all of that, they are standing up, and we're going to unite with the Latinos on this coming Sunday. They'll be marching with us. African-American people in the inner city who are not getting justice in terms of, there was a young man that was shot back in 2013 by a police officer whose last name was Shaw, and they never found that police officer guilty of any homicide over this young man. And those kind of incidents that we don't really hear about, we hear about the Officer Sean Bolton, which that was wrong. My heart goes out to his family for that young man being shot down. But we also have to have that same kind of concern for Latinos, for African Americans, for whites. Yes, all lives matter, but we have to also prove that minority lives matter, that we care for the person in the inner city just like we care for the people in the suburbs.
Yeah, that's a great word there, Stacy. And I didn't even know about that story with the Latino situation, the robbery there. That wasn't on the 6 o'clock news,
right?
That I recall. Was it reported?
They sped right through it, you know. But it happens every day. I mean, there's so many police. Pastor Greg Diaz has their lawn guys have been robbed 5 times at our church in broad daylight. And many times those reports go unheeded because, like I said, they're afraid to say anything to the police. And you know, you have a criminal mentality that says, okay, they're not going to say things, so we're going to keep taking advantage of them. But when we come together, when blacks, whites, Latinos, all people of color, all regardless of your class, regardless of what side of the railroad tracks you live on, when we come together, that's when we can, really command some power.
What really unites us is Jesus Christ.
Right.
If I was to take a knife and cut you, you're going to bleed red blood. cut me, I'm going to bleed red blood. We have the same common color blood, and it's not about our skin, which makes us unique. God created us. Mm-hmm. I was just thinking about that Samaritan that you mentioned a moment ago, the Good Samaritan. It wasn't just that religious reasons that he didn't fit. He didn't fit socially because of his biological makeup. He was what was considered a half-breed. Right. He was Jew and he was Greek, and he was like the lowest of low. But yet he still had the character to come forth and to minister to that person who was laying on the side of the road, battered and bleeding. Dr. King made reference to the character of one's heart, didn't he?
Right. You know, when he gave his famous speech, I Have a Dream, and he talked about one day seeing an America that no longer judge people on the basis of their skin color, but on the content of their character. America is still very much, racially conscious. We see skin color before we see the person. That's just our makeup. We've gotten better, but we still got a long way to go. Just as they did in Jesus' day. When Jesus made his inaugural address and he said, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me," they were okay with that. When he said, God has sent me to give sight to the blind and heal the sick, raise the dead, set the captives free, proclaim that this is the year of the Lord's favor, they were okay with that. But when he got to the part about God showing favor to the Samaritans, people outside their cultural class, that's when they wanted to throw him off the cliff.
Yeah.
And so we have to get to the point where we are truly a post-racial America, but we also have to acknowledge that we're not there yet.
I really believe that we can't get there until the heart has been born again.
Right.
I mean, Jesus Christ, I believe, has to come alive in our heart to help us to see that, That's what he had to do for me.
You know what, Byron, as I think about it, even Peter and Paul still had racial conflict. Even they were both born again, both apostles, and Peter was acting funny when some of the Jewish people came into town. He was eating with Gentiles prior to them coming into town, and Paul said, I had to confront Peter to his face and say, so now you don't know the Gentiles because the Jews are in town? And so if we're not careful, we'll all go back to default mode. And even as, it's not so much a racial problem as it is a class problem too, between the haves and have-nots, because I had to get on my congregation out in Collierville that just because we live in Collierville doesn't mean that we've lost connection with our relatives who still live in the inner city. Because Dr. King said injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. And the very crime we're trying to run away from by moving further out east will follow us if we don't do something about the crime down in North Memphis. And so North Memphis is still connected to Collierville. Collierville is still connected to Hickory Hill. We're all one family. And so we have to make sure that that justice is served everywhere, that violence ceases to be. As a matter of fact, there's a book called The Locust Effect, which links poverty to violence. And you can't properly eradicate poverty until you've dealt with violence. What good is it to give a man a microloan to start a business if the violent people in his community keep robbing his business? What good is it for somebody to go to school and get an education if they can't keep what they have because people who are impoverished or violent keep taking it?
That's a great word.
So we have to eradicate violence before we can effectively deal with poverty.
Crime is happening not just in South and North Memphis. I mean, we're seeing it, in Germantown. We're seeing it in Collierville. So everybody should be concerned about this in your community. Like you said, if you moved out of the city thinking you're going to get away from crime, I mean, it's following you to where you are. There's really no safe place you can go. This goes way back, but many years ago, there was a family that did research, wanted to find the safest place he could move his family to, And after studying it for months, trying to figure out where could he move his family to a safe place, the Falkland Islands is where he came up with. And 2 months after he moved his family there, the Falkland Islands were invaded. I know this is years ago. There's no safe haven in this life. But what we can do is create some unity, some safe zones, look out for each other. Like you said, to love our neighbor.
When you were saying that, a song came to my mind, this old gospel song that says the safest place in the whole wide world is in the will of God. So whether you're on a battlefront or prison ward, the safest place is when you're in the will of God. And I believe that when we as the people of God stand up and unite, we create our own safety. Jesus said, we're light on a hill, not light under a bush. We're salt of the earth. But what good is salt if it's lost its flavor? We're supposed to be the catalyst who change our community. We're supposed to be the salt that adds flavor. And if we come together and unite and let our light shine, we will dispel the darkness. There was a philosopher that Dr. King quoted, Hugo Vaughn, I think is his name. He said that if you put anybody in darkness, they will commit sin. But the guilt is not on the one who sins. The guilt is on the one who created the darkness.
Wow.
And so when we dispel the darkness through our care for the community, by creating alternative ways for these young people to get involved in healthy activity, creating charter schools, going across the street and tutoring a kid on helping them to read, we're giving sight to the blind. When we can help young men through workforce development learn a trade, we are healing the man with a withered hand. When we help the person who's been incarcerated over nonviolent offenses and help them to get integrated back into society, we just raised Lazarus from the dead. So this whole kingdom thing that Jesus did amongst us, we can still do in pragmatic ways by creating healthy initiatives to give people hope again. The whole pervasiveness of violence can be traced back to the root of people not having a sense of hope. If we can give people hope again, put people back to work again, get our kids educated in good schools, and cut the lights on in our community, I believe we'll see the violence come down. So this weekend when we're marching to begin a movement of practical kingdom ministry in every sector of Memphis, Tennessee. We're not just marching to get in front of the camera. We're marching to let people know we're tired of the violence, and now we begin to do something about it.
This Sunday, August 30th, is what you're calling Whiteout Sunday.
Right. This is where it starts. On that Sunday morning, we're asking every church in Shelby County to wear all white to church, to come to church on Sunday. You know, it's been said that Sunday morning is the most segregated hour, you know, in the South. Well, whether we're together or not, we can be together in unity by dressing in all white. Going back to Revelation chapter 7 again, the 144,000 who had the white robes on. And then when we leave church that afternoon, we're asking everybody to wear their all white and meet us at City Hall. And we're going to march from City Hall to the Civil Rights Museum. And for those who can't walk, I had an older lady come up to me and say, Pastor, I really want to be with you, but my feet are bad, and I'm going to get my grandchildren to walk with you. And I thought about that last night, and I said, well, you know what? We can get some of the older people to just meet us there at the Civil Rights Museum at 3 o'clock. Just assemble yourselves there, and if you can't march, meet us there, and we can stand together.
There's a possibility somebody might not have a white attire to wear. You know, does that exclude them from participation?
Not at all. Not at all. Get as close to it as you can. You know, I told one young lady, I said, just get a white T-shirt, a Fruit of the Loom T-shirt. But we don't expect people to go out and spend money. We just want to have some solidarity to show that we're all standing for the same thing. I just see an awesome picture of people of all tribes, nationalities walking down the streets of Memphis in all white. That is just such a powerful scene in my mind.
I can see this sea of white right now just thinking about it. It's going to be very powerful, and it's going to, it's going to make not just a point. There's a message there. There's a heart here of this unity, and we are as citizens of this community. We are tired of the crime that we're living in and day out. I mean, you've got to be. And if you've got a pulse, you can't be pleased with the things you see on the news. We don't need to keep having to put more alarms and bars on our house, and that's what's happening,
The youth campus where Darius Stewart was shot, we've been robbed, vandalized, tagged with graffiti several times. And I said, Lord, what is going on? And we talked about getting fences and getting some more security lights. But then one of my friends shared with me, he said, Stacy, what you need to do is build bridges, not fences. And so it dawned on me that maybe our community has changed so much that they don't know who we are. So we have to reintroduce ourselves. We have to go out into we walked out in the community last week, and we surveyed that community and asked them what they needed. And they said they needed after-school program, they need parenting classes, they need to know we care. So we're going to have a unity picnic. There's a large Latino contingent back there and African-American. And also we discovered there's some homes, some abandoned homes that we hope to purchase and take those homes and refurbish those homes and put people in those homes. Because watch this, you can't change what you don't own. So we're going to purchase homes. We're going to have a unity picnic. We're going to start canvassing that community more, because what we need to do, Byron, is build bridges, not fences, because you can build a fence and an alarm code. But watch this. I talked to a former gang member who joined our church last year, and he said in the gang he was trained by somebody who used to work for a former security company on how to successfully cut the wires on your home burglar alarm system so that the police wouldn't even be notified while he was breaking in your house. So the point I'm trying to make is that I made more headway in reforming the heart through Jesus Christ, reforming the heart of that gang member, than trying to get a burglar alarm that he's been trained to cut.
Yeah, that's a good.
So we got to cut through the sin that is in their hearts and show them that we love them through the love of Christ, and take those same evil initiatives that they were doing with their hands and give them something productive to do with their hands.
Brother, I like that. That's a good word. Going back to the meeting that you had with these area pastors that you had, what were some of the other comments, thoughts, or input from these other men?
We all had a sense that we were tired of it, and we wanted to do something. We realized that we've been doing initiatives over here, and this church has been doing that over there, but we hadn't come together as a whole. And we realized that if we put ourselves together, that those single torches will become bonfires. So the next step for us is we're going to have a working retreat the first Friday in September to come up with a collaboration, if you will. We're going to talk about social justice reform, because we feel that the criminal justice system is no longer servicing our community adequately. There is a disproportionate number of juveniles who are being pushed into prison simply because of race. If Memphis and Shelby County is at the top of the list of pushing juvenile delinquents into the pipeline to prison, and race is the big determining factor, something is wrong with that picture.
So can you give us some examples of that?
That right now in the DA's office, there is a rule that if there's a gun involved, that it automatically gets pushed across the desk as a felony. And so there's one particular case that I know of where a young man had a BB gun, and he had a friend in the car with him who did not know anything about the gun, did not know that this young man had robbed somebody. And when the police pulled him over and they had this gun, now this young man is facing 7 years in prison, and he was a star athlete and was making great grades in school, and now he's almost getting ready to go to prison because of the justice system that is really kind of not in his favor to get justice. And so we got to look at social justice reform, criminal justice reform. We're looking at collaborations we can do for midnight basketball, after school programs, Arise to Read, workforce development. We got to deal with domestic violence. 70% of the calls that police get oftentimes in my community are domestic violence issues. So when you look on the news, you see women shot or stabbed. 9 times out of 10 is because of a domestic issue. People don't know conflict resolution. Generational poverty creates this cycle of not being able to solve conflict in a healthy way because all they've seen all their life is violence, violence, violence. So as a church, we have to somehow get in and break that cycle and teach people how to work with emotional intelligence, teach people how to resolve conflict in a healthy way, deal with post-traumatic stress syndrome, which a lot of kids in the inner city have who grow up in like a third world country, hearing gunfire, seeing fights and stabbings and mama getting beat. And so we got to get in there and somehow interrupt that cycle in a good way.
Yeah. And you're starting things off in a good way with Whiteout Sunday. This Sunday, August 30th, again, asking listeners in your churches to wear white. Encourage those that go to your church to wear white. And then after you worship in your church, come out you're going to meet. Now, tell me the meeting place again.
City Hall at 2 o'clock. We'll assemble ourselves together. I believe we're trying to get some parking secure over by Redbird Stadium. But the best way you can park, come to City Hall, and then we're going to have some buses that bring you back to your car after the rally at the Civil Rights Museum, and we'll get you back to your car after that event is over.
And the rally will just take place right outside the Civil Rights Museum?
Yes, right out front, in front of the balcony where Dr. King was assassinated. We'll gather there, and we'll have prayer. We'll speak some prophetic declarations over our city for peace, for reconciliation. And at the conclusion, we'll go back to our cars and go home after a peaceful rally.
For those wanting, to follow up and to continue to be informed about Whiteout Sunday, about really, there's a lot of information I know posted on Faith 901, the hashtag Faith 901, a lot of events associated with what you're doing or connected with that I've seen on Twitter. Is there going to be a website, or how are you guys going to inform people?
I think that the best way to get there is, like you said, through the link Faith 901, or they can go to our church website at the letter N, the number 2, newdirection.org, n2newdirection.org, or Faith 901, and you'll get all the information you need about it.
Okay. I just want to thank you, dear brother.
Thank you, Byron.
For standing up. Pastors, I know you guys have got a full basket, I know, with all the responsibilities, just taking care of those things happening within your people and, your own family, but then realizing, hey, this is something we've got to do.
I can't, as busy as I am, I cannot sleep well knowing that my community is in danger. And I don't want to get to heaven one day and hear Jesus ask, when I was thirsty, why didn't you give me anything to drink? When I was hungry, why didn't you give me anything to eat? When I was naked, why didn't you clothe me? When I was in prison, why didn't you visit me? When I was shot, why didn't you come see about me? And I'll say, Lord, when did I see you like that? And he's going to say, whenever the least of these were harmed or hurt or suffered injustice and y'all did nothing, you did that to me. So as a pastor, as a Christian, it's my responsibility to be that Samaritan, cross the street and see who's bleeding, regardless of what color they are, because they are my brother, they're my sister.
Wow. Well spoken. It's been too long. I wish it could have been on a more friendly circumstance, but when we get together, there's just a unit. I just sense, the connection we have in Christ, and I always enjoy time together. And anytime you want to come back, you want to come back and do updates on this, please do. If you want to bring friends, please do. Greg Diaz wants to come back. You guys just come on. Let's do some more of this. Let's keep this in front of people. Thank you for what you're doing, my dear brother, for Christ's kingdom in our community.
Thank you, Byron. Thanks to the radio station. Y'all keep the light on. We need it.
Thank you so much. Friends, that's all the time we have on this edition of Mid-South Viewpoint. Thanks for stopping by. I'm Byron Tyler. Hey, we'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.